he said he went home and wrote down all the things that he could be that would make children smile. So he put stand-up comedian, dentist, that's an odd one, so you're really thinking out of the box, make children smile. Had some of the things that we just talked about before, and the one that he put down was clown. And he was like, okay, most of these things are ridiculous. And then I said, you know what? Wait a minute. Clown's not that crazy. You know what? I wonder what I'd have to do to be a clown. He goes, you know what? This is just crazy enough just for me to look at. I'm never going to do this. He goes, but I kind of wonder, how would somebody become a clown? So he went on, he went on the internet, I think at the time, or went to the library probably at that stage, and said, how do I become a clown? Did all this research on how to become a clown. Found out that it's actually rather easy to become a clown if you really want to do it. That you go to clown college and all this other stuff. You don't really need a whole lot of education, sort of like a crash course in clowning. And if you have any natural abilities for this, you actually could do it. Now, a circus needs to hire you, etc., or a rodeo or something like that. But he ended up going and actually saying, you know what, I got some time. He goes, I've got some money stocked away. I can go to clown college and see what that's like, and it'll be fun. He's still somewhere on the road doing this at this point in time and loves every minute of it. Really what brings him life and pays him a handsome wage. So that's why sometimes the crazy things that you think are going on, sometimes you need to break down the walls of fears or even just the walls of ignorance about what's out there that you could really do that might actually bring you some life. That make sense? Yeah? What do we have here? Someone, when I was in the early days, I've done this workshop a number of times, but in the early days, someone said to me, Mike, I think that you're completely wrong about all of this. And I said, why? They said, well, I think that what would bring me most happiness is doing cocaine all day. And they said, now, what do you have to say about that? And I was like, wow, that's a great question. And I think they were surprised I said that was a great question. They're like, what, really? I was kind of kidding. And I said, well, no. I said, but there could be things that we're doing that are sort of all about us, that they're all about our own selfishness and our own, our own sort of tendencies just to make ourselves happy. And that Ignatius tells us that vocation, if you will, the things that we're called to in our life, are really about where our deepest desires meet the world's greatest needs. Our deepest desires meet the world's greatest needs. So we need to think more about our own tendencies towards something that maybe we feel called to, but go a little bit more deeply, and use sort of some Catholic virtues that have come into our tradition over the years as sort of a little checklist. The first one I'll do is prudence is a virtue we can use. The virtue of prudence will tell us, is this something that is actually viable? Is it something I could actually do? Like the firefighter example I gave you before. I'm not going to do that. Not only am I not going to do it, even if I really try to shore up all my abilities to do it, probably not going to happen. And I really wouldn't have a good time trying to shore up all that, and I don't really feel like I need to do it. So is it viable? Is it smart? Is it something that I really could do? A vocation director I worked with a long time ago said, God will not call you to something that you suck at. That, you kind of have to have some natural abilities in some way to be something that you really are called to be. That doesn't mean that you never try something new, but it does mean that the things that you don't have a real natural inclination for probably aren't the things that you're really called to be. Second was fidelity. What commitments do I currently have that I need to stay faithful to? An example, if someone offered me a job here in Chicago, let's say, and I didn't go home and talk to my wife about that and just said, hey, we're going to move to Chicago. How do you like that? That would not be staying faithful to a commitment that I currently have that says our life is in New York. And then we could just up and move to Chicago. I might have a contract with my present employer that I couldn't break, or that I would at least need to talk to them about breaking before I move on to something new. So what present commitments do we have? Are we remaining faithful to them? Are there people who are depending on us in some way to fulfill some project or things that we're already doing that we need to see to the end before we move on to something else? Are there ways that we could fulfill that in other ways? Temperance is an easy one. Am I being selfish or greedy? Is this all about me? Another person who took this workshop said to me, and I pointed them to temperance as a solution. They said, what if I think I should just go and embezzle money to give that money to the poor? I'll steal money from rich people in some way. I don't know how I'd do it, but I'd steal money from people who I don't really think need it, and I'll give that money to the poor. And I said, wonder if you could do that legally, was my first thought. But then my second thought was, okay, I said, well, even the notion of doing something that's not a good does not mean, the ends don't justify the means. I said, so you're really saying that you want to be the conduit here to do something that's not good for you, nor for the rich person who's worked hard and earned a living, just to give that money away to someone who you think is deserving. What part about this is really about you being the conduit? And he said, yeah, that's right. He said, I think that's where we've sort of gone awry. I mentioned earlier that I went and talked to a lot of people about, one, I interviewed those 5 or 6 people that Arthur had made me interview about the retreats, about the retreat jobs, but I also looked at some of the people who I thought had the job that I thought was a dream job for me. As I mentioned before, I interviewed all the top people in the field and asked them, what's the best and worst part of their job? You could use these as a checklist for the things that you're currently doing as well. That if you're not happy at the career that you're in right now, or if you're not happy with the relationship that you have with someone right now, you could say, well, what's the best part of what's going on right now? What's the worst part? How did I end up here to begin with? What really attracted me about this job at the start of it? And how has that sort of changed over time? My friend Lisa was working a job for a long time, and she said that she was really having a hard time with things after about 3 years of working in the same office. And she said, well, I think maybe I want to make a move, but I'm not really sure. I kind of like the office I'm in, and I kind of like what I'm doing sometimes, but there are things that just drive me crazy. And I said, well, what's the part of your job that you really like? And she said, well, I really like working with this particular group of people. And I said, okay, so what's the part of the job that you really don't like? And she said, well, I really don't like doing these particular things. And she ticked off 3 or 4 things that she had to do at her job, or she thought she had to do anyway. I said, well, do you think that maybe you could do more of the work with that particular group of people and maybe less of some of the other things that you're going on? Could you go and talk to your boss about removing some of these things from your plate and giving them to somebody else so that you could do more of what it is that you really feel called to do? And it never occurred to me to ask anybody that. And I said, well, go ask him. What does he say? All he could say is no. And she said, yeah, okay. So she went, she asked her boss, and the boss said, yeah, of course you could do that. And he goes, let's take these 2 things off your plate. We could give those to Howard, who does those things better than you do anyway. And he goes, one of these things is something that you're just going to have to deal with. He said, I know you don't like doing it. He said, but it sort of comes with the territory. And he goes, and the other one, maybe you can do it sometimes. We'll get somebody else to do it the other part of the time. And her life on the workforce, anyway, sort of improved tremendously. The same is true with relationships. Why are you in the relationship that you're in? What originally attracted you to this person to begin with? And how has that changed over time? What are the parts of the relationship that you've discovered as you've gone through it that you now don't like? And how do you either move away from that or have a discussion about that or whatever? That makes sense?